Read this letter." Michael Anderson's voice thundered through the glass and steel lobby, his hand trembling as he gripped the wrinkled envelope. Across from him, little Emily, just 7 years old, clutched her backpack straps with all her might, refusing to flinch even as security closed in. Her blue eyes, shining with both fear and defiance, locked onto his. Mommy said, "If you don't read it now, we both might not survive." The room froze. Executives gasped. Was this child speaking truth or playing a dangerous game no one expected? What would you do if you were standing there? Tell me your thoughts below. Michael Anderson thought he had seen every surprise a CEO could face until that Tuesday morning in Manhattan. The lobby of Anderson Technologies was buzzing with the usual rhythm of ambition heels, striking polished marble suits streaming through the glass doors, the constant hum of phones. It was business as usual until a small figure in a red cardigan stood firmly in front of the reception desk, clutching a wrinkled envelope as if it were a lifeline. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Her blonde hair was tied in a slightly crooked ponytail, her sneakers scuffed from long walks. What set her apart was not her size, but the unshakable determination in her blue eyes. Employees slowed their steps, guards exchanged quick glances, and the receptionist leaned forward, uncertain whether to call security or bend down to hear the child out. Then came the words that silenced the entire lobby. "Sir, can you read this letter? It's very, very important." Her small voice carried further than anyone expected. The guards froze. The receptionist's hand hovered above the phone, and several executives actually stopped mid-stride. Something in her trembling tone demanded attention. 40 stories above Michael Anderson sat in his glass-walled corner office overlooking Central Park. At 42, he was the face of relentless success. His tailored suits were as sharp as his reputation unyielding, calculating a man who built an empire by keeping his heart locked behind stone walls. He rarely noticed the beauty of the city stretched beneath him. Deals numbers, quarterly gains, those were his constants. Human stories seldom made it onto his desk. The intercom buzzed. His receptionist's voice was calm but carried an unusual weight. "Mr. Anderson, there's a child here. She insists you must read a letter. She says it's urgent. I've never seen anything like this before." Michael frowned. He had no time for interruptions, especially from children. But curiosity scratched at him, and his receptionist had never broken protocol in a decade of working for him. With a sigh, he said, "Send her up." Minutes later, the executive elevator opened. Out stepped the girl, clutching the envelope with both hands as if it might break apart. The opulent rugs, mahogany paneling, and modern art surrounding her seemed irrelevant. She had come with one mission. Guided gently by the receptionist, she walked toward the imposing double doors of Michael's office. She paused only briefly, then knocked 3 small raps that echoed down the silent corridor. "Come in," Michael's deep voice commanded. Emily Carter pushed open the door and stepped inside. For a moment, she looked like a fragile doll in a vast kingdom of glass and steel. Michael looked up, irritation ready in his expression, but it faltered when he saw her eyes, blue, clear, piercingly familiar, in a way that unsettled him. "Are you the boss man?" Emily asked quietly. Michael cleared his throat. "I'm Michael Anderson, yes. And you must be the one with the letter." Emily nodded and crossed the thick carpet, her small sneakers soundless. She extended the envelope as if it were sacred. "My mommy wrote this. She said it's very, very important. You have to read it now." The paper was slightly damp from her nervous palms. The handwriting was elegant but weak, as if each letter had been a battle. Michael hesitated, a rare tremor passing through his usually steady hands. Something about the faint lavender scent on the envelope tugged at a memory buried too deep. Slowly, he unfolded the letter. "My dearest Michael," it began. The words blurred for a moment before snapping into focus. The writer was Anna Carter, a name he had not heard in more than a decade yet, one that had once defined his life. They had shared a love that had felt indestructible in Boston years ago, until betrayal, at least what he had believed was betrayal, had shattered it. The letter's sentences struck harder than any boardroom negotiation. Anna revealed that Emily was her daughter. She spoke of long years of raising the child alone, of hiding the truth after their painful separation, of struggling with an illness that now left her with little time. Her plea was simple. Emily needed him. If he had ever loved her, he had to read this letter and face the truth. Michael's breath caught. He remembered the doctors telling him he could never father a child. He had accepted it as fact-building walls around his heart to shield it from the longing he dared not entertain. Yet here stood a little girl, with eyes that mirrored his own, holding proof in trembling hands. He looked at Emily, who waited silently, watching his face with a mix of fear and fragile hope. Her chin lifted the way his did when he was deep in thought. He had never met this child before, yet everything about her presence felt familiar. The letter ended with words that stripped away the armor he had worn for years. "If you cannot do this for me, please do it for her. She deserves a chance, a father's love, a future. I am out of time." Michael set the letter down slowly. For a man known for his icy detachment for boardroom victories and ruthless decisions, the silence that filled his office felt heavier than any corporate failure. He lifted his gaze to Emily, and for the first time in years, the unshakable CEO felt tears threaten. The world outside his glass office walls had not changed. Central Park still stretched out in its autumn colors. Cabs still streamed through the streets, the city still pulsed with ambition. But inside that room, Michael Anderson's life had just shifted forever. Michael sat alone in his office long after Emily had been led downstairs to wait with the receptionist. The letter trembled slightly in his hand, its lavender scent still lingering. He had read it twice already, yet every line pressed against him with the weight of a past he had buried. Anna Carter. Even her name reopened a wound he had spent years convincing himself had healed. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. But all he saw were memories of Boston a decade ago, when he was a younger man and believed in forever. Anna had been everything his ordered life wasn't. She was warmth in a coffee shop on Commonwealth Avenue, laughter that broke through his carefully built walls, a fire that made the world seem less cold. They had spent years together dreaming about a life full of possibility. She had talked about wanting a family, a small house with music playing in the kitchen, a place where love was louder than success. Michael had wanted it too, though quietly, uncertainly, until the day a doctor told him the words that had silenced those dreams. He was infertile. The diagnosis had landed like a verdict, stripping him of the hope he never dared say aloud. He remembered the evening he told Anna. The two of them had been walking along the Charles River, and she had reached for his hand. He had pulled away, ashamed, angry at fate, convinced she deserved more than a broken man who couldn't give her children. She had pleaded with him, saying love was enough, that they could build a family in different ways. But Michael had already let the shame carve deep into him. That was the beginning of the end. Then came the whispers. A photograph slipped under his apartment door, Anna at dinner with another man. Words of betrayal from friends who claimed to have seen her leaving someone's loft. He never asked her directly. He simply believed it. Pride, pain, and fear of inadequacy built the story for him. One night, without warning, he ended it, leaving her standing on her porch in the rain. She had cried his name, but he didn't look back. By the time he boarded a flight to New York, their history was sealed behind silence. Now, years later, Her handwriting told him that what he thought he knew was only half the truth. He read again the lines that spoke of Emily, of the lonely nights Anna carried the burden of raising a child alone. If the letter was right, then he had walked away, not from betrayal, but from the greatest love he would ever know. Worse, he had abandoned the chance to be a father. Michael pressed his palms against his eyes, as if to block the flood of memories. He was known for decisions made in seconds, for never wavering. But this was different. His instincts screamed at him to protect the fortress he had built. Yet something else pulled harder. The image of Emily standing brave in his office, her eyes so achingly familiar. As the city darkened outside, Michael pulled out his phone. He hesitated for several long seconds before dialing a number his assistant dug out from the letterhead. The hospital in Brooklyn answered, transferring him to a room on the oncology floor. The voice that came through was softer than he remembered, strained by illness, but still carrying the melody of years ago. Michael Anna's tone was a whisper, as if saying his name was both a relief and a wound. He cleared his throat suddenly, unsure of how to speak after so long. "Anna, I got the letter. Emily brought it." There was silence, broken only by the steady beep of a monitor in the background. Then her voice, "I didn't know if you'd come. I didn't even know if you'd read it." The years collapsed in an instant. He wanted to demand answers about the past, about the photograph, about the stories he believed. Yet the weight of her illness pressed heavier than his pride. All that mattered now was that time was running out. "I'm coming," he said simply. Later that night, he drove across the bridge into Brooklyn. For the first time in years, Michael felt the city not as numbers or deals, but as streets leading him back to unfinished chapters. Emily sat beside him in the back seat, her small hands clutching a sketchbook she carried everywhere. She had been quiet, watching him with cautious trust. When they arrived at the hospital, Michael was struck by how different this world was from the towers he commanded. The sterile white halls smelled faintly of antiseptic, yet every corner hummed with stories of resilience and fear. Nurses passed with quiet efficiency, families huddled in waiting rooms, whispers and prayers filling the space where ambition had no place. Anna's room was near the end of the corridor. Emily pushed the door open first, running to her mother's bedside. Michael followed, and the sight of Anna nearly took his breath. She was thinner than he remembered, her hair shorter, her face pale, but her eyes, those same brown eyes that once laughed in Boston cafes, lit up when they landed on him. For a moment, no words were needed. The years fell away, leaving only the truth of who they had been and what still lingered. Michael took a chair by her bed, the letter folded neatly in his jacket pocket, and for the first time in a very long while he let himself feel the weight of regret. Anna reached for his hand, her touch frail but steady. "She's yours, Michael. I never lied about that. Whatever you were told back then, it wasn't true." The ache in his chest deepened. He had wasted years on a story built on pride and suspicion. Now, with Anna's hand in his, and Emily's head resting on her mother's shoulder, Michael understood what the letter truly meant. It wasn't just a plea for help. It was a second chance he didn't deserve but couldn't ignore. And as he sat there listening to the steady rhythm of Anna's breathing, Michael Anderson realized the past he had tried so hard to forget was about to rewrite the rest of his life. The next morning, Michael returned to the hospital. The gray skies over Brooklyn matched the heaviness in his chest. He had spent the night in silence, staring at the city lights from his penthouse window, hearing Emily's words over and over. "My mommy doesn't have much time." He told himself he had come to offer support, to provide the resources Anna needed, but beneath the surface was a need he could not shake, a desperate search for truth. Anna looked stronger than the night before, though her skin still carried the pale shadow of illness. Emily sat at her bedside, sketching little figures on her notepad, occasionally looking up as if to remind herself that Michael was real and not some dream she might lose. Michael pulled a chair close his suit jacket folded neatly on his arm and tried to find the words that could bridge 10 years of silence. "Anna," he began, his voice low, "I need to ask you something. That night, all those years ago, was I wrong?" Her eyes softened with a sorrow that reached deeper than words. "You believed what someone wanted you to believe. You thought I betrayed you. But Michael, I never did. I never stopped loving you even when you left." Her words cut through him. He remembered the photograph, the rumors, the way his pride had refused to let him question. Now, for the first time, he wondered if his entire life since then had been built on a lie. The door opened and Rebecca appeared. She carried herself with the same commanding poise she had in every gala and business meeting, her dark dress sharp against the sterile white walls. Her eyes narrowed as they fell on Anna and Emily. "Michael, we need to talk," she said, her voice clipped. Michael stood tension, stiffening his frame. "Not now." Rebecca's gaze flicked toward Anna. "This is exactly what I warned you about. You've built a life, Michael. You don't need to dig into old mistakes. And this child," she gestured toward Emily, who shrank back against her mother, "you don't even know if she's yours." Michael's jaw tightened. "That's what I intend to find out." Within days, he arranged for a DNA test. He wanted clarity for Emily's sake as much as his own. The process was quick, just a swab, a signature, a promise that the results would come in a few days. Emily held his hand through it, nervous but trusting. Anna watched with quiet strength, though her eyes betrayed the fear that lingered. When the results arrived, Michael sat at the hospital with the folder in his hands. His heart hammered as he unfolded the paper. Words blurred before his eyes. Probability of paternity, 0%. The room grew unbearably quiet. Emily looked up at him, her eyes wide, searching for reassurance. "What does it mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. Michael swallowed hard, forcing steadiness into his tone. "It says, I'm not your father." The words felt foreign on his tongue, cruel in their certainty. Anna shook her head immediately, clutching Emily to her chest. "No, that's impossible. Michael, I swear to you, Emily is yours." Rebecca stepped forward, her arms crossed with cold satisfaction. "See, I told you. This is a fantasy. Don't let yourself be manipulated." Emily's small shoulders began to shake. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, "Did I make a mistake coming here?" Michael's heart cracked. He wanted to tell her no, that she hadn't, but the paper in his hands burned like proof against everything he felt. For the first time in years, he had no certainty, no ground to stand on. He had built an empire on facts, numbers, evidence, and now evidence was tearing him apart. That night, he walked the streets outside the hospital, unable to shake the image of Emily's tears. He told himself to accept the result, to move on, to keep the walls up. But his mind kept returning to her face, to the way she tilted her head just as he did when lost in thought, to the sketch she had left behind on the hospital table, a drawing of 3 figures holding hands beneath the words, "My family." The next day, he returned to the hospital anyway. Emily was in the common room playing the piano for patients gathered in wheelchairs. Her small hands moved clumsily over the keys, but there was something beautiful in her effort. The melody faltered, then rose again, uncertain but determined. The patients clapped softly, and Emily's smile returned, if only for a moment. Michael stood in the doorway watching. Something stirred in him that no test result could erase. It wasn't logic. It wasn't science. It was recognition, deep and undeniable. When Emily saw him, she ran to him, her sketchbook in her hand. She opened to a fresh drawing herself, her mother and Michael standing together. She had written across the page, "Don't give up." Michael knelt down, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. He wanted to believe the paper in the folder. He wanted to protect himself from disappointment. But looking into her eyes, he knew the truth wasn't written in a lab report. It was standing right in front of him. "Emily," he said softly, "I don't know how all of this will turn out, but I need you to know something. You didn't make a mistake. You were brave. And whatever happens, I'm not going anywhere." Her arms wrapped around his neck, holding tight as if she believed him more than the words on the page. And in that embrace, Michael understood that the battle between lies and truth was far from over. The paper said one thing, but his heart told him another, and for the first time in years he was willing to follow where his heart led. Michael could not shake the gnawing suspicion that something about the DNA results was wrong. It was not simply denial or wishful thinking. It was the way Anna had looked him straight in the eye with unwavering conviction, the way Emily's every glance mirrored pieces of himself. The folder from the lab sat on his desk cold and sterile, but it did not match the truth he felt in his bones. One evening, long after leaving the hospital, he called an old friend, Dr. Harris, a geneticist he had once worked with during a corporate project in Boston. "I need an independent test," Michael said. His voice was measured, but beneath it ran a current of urgency. "I want it handled with absolute discretion." Dr. Harris agreed, and arrangements were made quietly. Emily was brought in under the pretense of a routine checkup. She was calm, even cheerful, clutching her sketchbook as always. Michael stayed with her through the process, his large hand steadying hers as the swab was taken. Anna watched from the bed, her breathing uneven, but relief flickered across her face. Days later, Michael received a call from Dr. Harris. The voice on the other end was calm but firm. The previous results were tampered with. The probability of paternity is over 99%. Emily is your daughter. For a moment, Michael said nothing. The truth hit him like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Relief, regret, and a surge of joy collided all at once. He thanked Dr. Harris quietly, then sat back in his chair, staring at the city lights outside his window. The fortress of doubt he had built around himself began to crumble. The next morning, Michael returned to the hospital with the new results in hand. He found Anna sitting up in bed, Emily by her side coloring in her sketchbook. When he told them the truth, Anna closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. Emily tilted her head trying to understand, then smiled the brightest smile Michael had ever seen. She threw her arms around him, and in that instant no test result mattered more than the child who now called him her father. But truth had a shadow. That same day, Michael confronted Rebecca. She was waiting in his office, sipping espresso as if nothing in the world could rattle her. He placed the corrected report on his desk between them. "You interfered," he said flatly. Rebecca's eyes flicked to the folder, then back to him, her calm mask slipping for the first time. "I did what I had to do," she snapped. "You have no idea what you're throwing away. This company, this life, you're about to destroy it for a child you didn't even know existed until a week ago." Michael leaned forward, his voice steady. "That child is mine. You tampered with medical results to keep me from the truth. Do you realize what you've done?" Her silence was answer enough. She looked away, her jaw tight. For years, she had stood at his side at charity events, board meetings, the endless cycle of high society, but her loyalty had never been to him. It had been to the life his power afforded her. "You're finished here," he said. His tone was not cruel, but final. "Pack your things. Don't come back." Rebecca's heels clicked sharply against the marble as she stormed out, her presence leaving a chill in the room. Michael exhaled slowly, the weight of years lifting from his chest. In the days that followed, Michael began to change. He spent more time at the hospital sitting with Anna during her treatments, walking with Emily through the gardens outside. He arranged for specialists. The best doctors he could find determined that Anna would have every chance at recovery. One afternoon, he took Emily on a surprise trip to Central Park. They rented a rowboat and drifted across the lake, the skyline shimmering behind them. Emily laughed as she dipped her hand into the water droplets sparkling in the sun. "I always wanted to come here with my dad," she said simply. The words landed in Michael's heart like a promise. Soon after, he arranged another surprise. For years, Emily had dreamed of going to Disneyland, something Anna had never been able to afford. Michael booked the trip himself, insisting on being there for every moment. When Emily walked through the gates and saw the castle rising before her, she gasped in awe. She held his hand tightly the entire day, never once letting go. Back in New York, Michael made a public announcement at his company headquarters. Standing before hundreds of employees, he introduced Emily as his daughter. His voice carried not just authority, but pride. "Family is not a distraction," he told them. "It's the foundation we build everything else upon." The applause that followed was not for a CEO, but for a man rediscovering what mattered most. For Anna, the change in Michael was as healing as the treatments themselves. She saw the way he cared for Emily, the way he sat at her bedside reading aloud from books they once loved in Boston, the way he looked at her with a tenderness she thought had been lost. Though her body was frail, her spirit strengthened with every gesture. The truth had been unveiled not only in the lab results, but in the way Michael's life shifted entirely. The empire he once guarded with cold precision now felt secondary to the warmth of a child's embrace, to the quiet moments spent beside the woman he had never stopped loving. On a quiet evening, as the city glowed beyond the hospital windows, Michael held Anna's hand and whispered, "I should have fought for us years ago. I can't change that, but I promise you this, I'll fight for every day we have left." And for the first time in years, Anna smiled with the peace of knowing that lies had finally given way to truth. The weeks that followed brought a rhythm none of them had expected. For years, Michael had lived by schedules filled with board meetings, mergers and numbers that defined his success. Now his calendar was marked by hospital visits, family dinners, and small adventures that centered on Emily and Anna. It was a shift so complete that even his colleagues noticed the change. He was still a leader, but something softer now guided the way he carried himself. Anna's treatments were long and exhausting, yet she was no longer facing them alone. Michael was there for every appointment, often holding her hand through the worst of it. Emily colored by her side, filling pages with bright drawings of hope and futures she believed were waiting. There were moments when Anna's strength faltered, but each time she looked at Michael and Emily together, she found reason to push forward. One Saturday afternoon, Michael surprised them with a picnic in Central Park. The autumn leaves painted the ground in shades of gold and red. He had prepared everything himself: sandwiches, apple pie, even a blanket spread near the water. Emily ran to chase squirrels while Anna leaned against Michael, her head resting on his shoulder. For a while, they simply sat in silence, letting the sounds of laughter and birdsong fill the space. Then Michael turned his eyes steady on Anna. "Anna," he said, his voice quiet, "but sure, I don't want to waste another day. Will you marry me?" Tears welled in her eyes before she even answered. Emily came bounding back, confused by the sudden emotion. "What's happening?" she asked, clutching her sketchbook. Michael smiled at her. "I'm asking your mom if she'll let me take care of both of you for the rest of my life." Emily looked at Anna, then at Michael. "Only if I get to walk with Mom down the aisle too," she said, with the seriousness only a child could manage. Anna laughed through her tears and nodded. "Then yes, 1,000 times yes." The wedding was small, but filled with warmth. Friends from their past colleagues who had watched Michael transform, and neighbors who had supported Anna through her illness gathered in a simple chapel. Emily wore a pale blue dress and held her mother's hand tightly as they walked together down the aisle. Michael stood waiting, not as a distant CEO, but as a man who had finally found his home. When the vows were spoken, Emily was asked to read a short blessing. Her young voice carried through the room with clarity that touched everyone present. "Family is the people who never leave your side even when things get hard," she said, her eyes shining. "I'm glad I found mine." Afterward, the reception was filled with laughter and music. There was no grand display, just the comfort of shared joy. Anna and Michael danced slowly, Emily twirling around them, the three of them forming a circle no one could break. Back at their home, Michael had framed the letter that had started it all. It hung in the hallway where they would pass it each day. The paper was creased and fragile, but its words were now a symbol of second chances and courage. For Emily, it was proof that even the smallest voices could change lives. For Anna, it was a reminder that love had survived the years and the lies. For Michael, it was the legacy of choosing heart over pride. In time, Anna's health improved under the care she had once feared was impossible to afford. Emily flourished not only in school, but in music, encouraged by Michael to pursue her piano lessons with passion. Each recital was a celebration with her parents in the front row, cheering the loudest. Michael's company also began to change under his leadership. Inspired by his own journey, he created a foundation that supported families battling medical hardships. Instead of simply writing checks, he involved himself personally, meeting with parents and children, listening to their stories. He was no longer just a man of numbers. He had become a man of people. One evening, months later, Michael walked Emily to bed. She handed him her sketchbook before drifting to sleep. On the last page was a drawing of three figures again, this time standing in front of their home, with the framed letter visible through the window. Across the top she had written, "Thank you for reading my letter, Dad." Michael closed the book gently and kissed her forehead. As he turned off the light, he felt the weight of everything that had led them here, the mistakes, the regrets, the truths unveiled. It was a path he never expected to walk, yet it was the one that gave his life meaning. The letter had changed everything. It had begun as a desperate plea from a dying mother and a brave little girl, but it ended as a legacy of love, resilience, and the power of second chances. And for Michael Anderson, it was proof that sometimes the smallest piece of paper can carry the greatest truth. Years later, whenever visitors asked about the framed letter, Michael would simply smile. "That's the reason I have everything that matters," he would say. And Anna, standing beside him, would take his hand while Emily played piano in the next room. It was no longer just a story about a letter. It was the story of a family born out of truth, tested by lies, and made whole by love. When we look back at the journey of Michael, Anna, and Emily, what began as a fragile letter in the trembling hands of a little girl unfolded into a story of redemption, forgiveness, and the power of second chances. A man who once believed himself incapable of being a father discovered not only that he had a daughter, but that he had been missing the very thing his heart needed most, a family built on love rather than fear. A mother who fought against illness with every ounce of her strength found that her hope was not in medicine alone, but in the bonds of love that grew stronger each day. And a child, innocent yet incredibly brave, became the bridge that reunited broken hearts and reshaped destinies. From the lobby of a skyscraper to the quiet corners of a modest apartment, every step of their story carried lessons that reach far beyond their own lives. Michael's success had always been measured in numbers, awards, and influence, but the true measure of his life revealed itself not in the boardroom, but in the way a child's trust softened his hardened spirit. He realized that money and power could never replace the joy of being called Daddy, or the warmth of hearing laughter fill a home once silent. Anna's journey reminded us all that courage is not the absence of fear. She faced death, heartbreak, and poverty, yet she never stopped fighting for her daughter's future. Her letter was not simply a cry for help, it was an act of pure love, a determination that even in her weakness she would leave her daughter with strength. That choice set everything in motion, and Emily, though only 7 years old, demonstrated a truth that many adults forget. Bravery often comes in the smallest forms. Her decision to cross a city alone to deliver her mother's letter was not reckless. It was the act of a child who believed that love and truth were worth any risk. In her innocence, she held more wisdom than most of us show in a lifetime. So, what is the lesson for us today? It is that the power to change lives is often found in the simplest of actions. A conversation we've been putting off, a forgiveness we've been too proud to give, a phone call that could reopen a door we thought was shut forever. Like Michael, we may carry wounds from the past that keep us guarded. Like Anna, we may face struggles that make us feel powerless. And like Emily, we may feel small in a world too big. But this story proves that courage, honesty, and love can cut through every barrier, no matter how high. For you, watching this now, ask yourself, what is your letter? What truth needs to be spoken in your life? Who is waiting for you to be brave enough to reach out to forgive or to fight for them? The story of Michael, Anna, and Emily is not just theirs. It is a mirror for all of us, reminding us that healing begins the moment we stop hiding from what matters most. And here's how we can apply this lesson. Start with one act of courage today. Write that message, make that call, have that conversation. Don't wait for the perfect time, because often the perfect time is now. Love once lost can be found again. Families broken by lies can be rebuilt on truth. And the smallest act of bravery can create a legacy far greater than we ever imagined. If this story touched your heart, I want to hear from you. Did Emily's courage remind you of a child you know? Did Anna's strength resonate with struggles in your own life? Did Michael's transformation inspire you to think differently about what really matters? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice might be the encouragement someone else needs today. And if you believe stories like this are worth telling, please subscribe to this channel. Your support gives us the strength and motivation to continue creating powerful, meaningful content that inspires and uplifts. Together, we can build a community where love, courage, and truth are celebrated. Because in the end, this was never just about a letter, it was about how love, once rediscovered, can rewrite the future. And maybe the same could happen in your life too.